Thank you for joining At Liberty. I'm George Botros, Editor-in-Chief of The Liberty. How does one foster empathy and combat apathy in herself or others? In an organization chiefly concerned with concrete political issues, the question might seem too theoretical or even sentimental to broach directly. But it's a question Bhavana Akula doesn't shy away from. Her recent piece for The Liberty has the character of an informant interview in a social science experiment. Yet her piece is as attuned to its implications for activists as could be expected from the former MAS Director of Activism. It's a pleasure to have you on, Bhavana. So for viewers who have not yet read your piece, could you very briefly explain the game you participated in?
So there's this conference for New Jersey youth leaders called HOBY, and they take you through a series of leadership building exercises. And one of them, it seemed to just be this almost cartoonish game of having ice cream cities and different rules about how to approach certain leaders about getting resources. So the way it was set up, they didn't tell us at first, but we were split into different sized taped zones on the floor. And depending on where we were located, we were policed for stepping outside of our zones, or we were just limited in the resources that we could get. Essentially, at the beginning, they were pretty calm. But then as it went on, the adults in the room who were the facilitators started becoming very loud and in people's faces to the point where we were wondering if something was wrong. And a bunch of kids who were in the disadvantaged cities decided to just say that it was just a game, it didn't matter. But meanwhile, they had set up a jail and kids were being put in there and they weren't able to participate in the event anymore. And it almost turned into this Lord of the Flies chaotic little island in this tiny conference room. And in that moment, you could see the different personalities come out and things that we hear now when we're talking about voter engagement and thinking that you have the ability to make a difference. In that small room, people were thinking that they were just students who would have to speak out against adults who are being in their faces. And clearly the power dynamics were putting them at the lower end of the spectrum. And you started to see some people say, well, it's just a game, it'll be over in 30 minutes. We don't need to say anything. And then some people, including myself, we just didn't take it well because we were trying to come up with creative solutions and we were just being yelled at. And we just felt fundamentally it was incorrect. And we thought the facilitators themselves were doing something that was wrong. So we tried to speak up, and by the end of the game, before it got almost physical, they stopped us and they started to explain that it's actually supposed to compare us to the inequities that are in New Jersey with where school funding goes. And it turned into a larger conversation about policing, race relations, and all of those social issues that were somehow tied back into this game that started with ice cream cities.
So you describe how stepping into the shoes of a disadvantaged person in this mock society made you less apathetic to their plight. How do you think about the relationship between empathy and apathy?
I think a lot of times people just assume that they don't have the ability to make a change. And I think it's something we hear a lot, especially with the onslaught of celebrity videos encouraging us to vote. The reason that those messages don't always land is because for other people, they feel like it's just this empty message or empty motion of voting when there's other powers at play, like money and politics. So a lot of the apathy comes from people who once cared and then went through some sort of process and then got jaded. But I think the reason why there's so much of an increase in voter engagement is that we've seen youth-led revolutions happen in real time. So we now understand that because we have role models that are very vocal, we can understand that we're not that many degrees away from them. So I think part of it is empathy, part of it is realizing that the world isn't just populated by versions of yourself, and there's people with diverse experiences and all of their needs need to be met. But I think the most important part is people seeing themselves represented and seeing the fact that they do have the capacity to make a change. I think that's how you kind of turn the switch from apathy to active participation in democracy and general communities.
So you describe how when you spoke out against the injustices in the game, those for whom the game was rigged in favor of just kind of said, Bhavana, sit down, shut up. Um, so how effective do you think the program was at teaching you how oppression against minorities can be normalized?
I think the most compelling part wasn't even like when you look at any sort of like political writing, usually what you see is that it's very see-through. You can see exactly the connections that they're trying to make, but the most effective examples of like uncovering like the stupidity of like certain political norms or like the corruption that is there in society is when it's a little bit more indirect. And I think even though it might seem simplistic afterwards, in the moment, with the context of just these other like nonsensical games, like trying to build a bridge across a room and other like very field day type activities, um, you could kind of like see people start to just get into the like rhythm of just playing a game, following rules, and like living life normally. And I think when you apply that to a broader context, people need to make money, they need to support their families, they need to do these basic tasks. So they get used to the rhythm of life where you just go with whatever's practical. So if it's not practical for you to take time off of work to go vote, or if you don't have the time to go register and all these things, then you're going to just automatically assume that it's not in your little circle of importance. So I think what happened is it wasn't even just that it was like the like strawberry ice cream city, the one that was the most privileged. Yes, they were like cheering as you would if you're winning any game. And they attributed it to their own like ability to stay within the tape or to be creative in their requests for resources. But what struck me most was the fact that people who were in the most oppressed cities that were getting yelled at the most, they like good proportions of them were yelling at other kids who were trying to speak up. They were saying that they were taking things too seriously, that they were being too loud, that their ears hurt, like things like that, where again, if you apply it to things we hear now, it's so easy to draw connections because it's much harder to go against the current flow of events than it is to just decide that you're going to be that person who speaks out, especially when you have blowback from the people that you're trying to help apart from yourself.
So Bhavana, of course, we're limited by the chaotic state of the world in 2020, but what are some concrete ways you've brought these insights into your activism?
Well, actually, recently, when the videos of George Floyd being murdered went viral, I was in the middle of taking 5 AP exams. And I was under a lot of stress. I was running for an elected position in the Mid-Atlantic state. So, as you know, I definitely was not sleeping or eating on time. I was very stressed, but it just like overwhelmed me completely. I was actually sitting right here on the floor on FaceTime with my friend. And then I started seeing all of these images and reading all these reports of what had happened. And it was the night before my chem exam. And I just absolutely could not focus, but I knew that I had to do something. I had like the reality in my head that I was a 17-year-old kid studying for chem, sitting on my bedroom floor, but I knew that I wanted to do something. So about a week after more of my exams had been completed, I spent the whole night just talking to so many different people from like Blue Lives Matter to Black Lives Matter to like everyone in between. And at like 3 or 4 in the morning, I just recorded this video of me reflecting on that and that like mall incident where there was a shooter and my family was there at the same time. Um, and I just realized that like I wanted to make some space for kids who felt like me to also contribute. So actually in like the last week, I've started meeting with these like 30 plus kids that have all decided that like in one way or another, whether it's art or research or anything else, sports, they're going to try to contribute to different activism causes with whatever skills that they have to offer. So that's definitely one main thing that kind of combines all these ideas that have like I've been like I don't know all these like lessons that I've learned from these different experiences that I talked to you about and other ones. But I think even in existing organizations like JSA, there is a huge capacity for change once people start embracing the idea that there isn't just one set model of activism or of change.
Well, this interview has really gotten me thinking a lot about activism and, of course, ice cream. If you'd like to hear more about this topic, Bhavana's piece is out now. If you'd like to share your voice with the Liberty, we'd love to hear from you, and all you have to do is go to our website and click on the Google form. Bhavana, it's been a pleasure having you.